Perhaps the best part about the Japanese Grand Prix is that it's over, we'll leave it behind, and we'll have the entirety of the month of April for the FIA to solve these regulations and make the next races of the season better. But in the meantime, I'll be rating the individual performances of each and every single driver in the Japanese Grand Prix, taking into account both qualifying and the race. Let's go! Our first DNF, Oliver Bearman. Up until this race, he was probably the driver of the season. Only 2 races in, but driver of the season nonetheless. However, he couldn't get out of Q1 while his teammate did, had a decent start in a Ferrari engine, and ended up crashing. Wasn't his fault, as I've already said. For me, that incident is entirely on the regulations. But he wasn't having a good race anyways before that. I cannot give him more than a 2. Lance Stroll was dead last on qualifying. Seems like Aston sacrificed what little pace they had in order to attempt to finish the race. With Stroll, that didn't work. He ended up retiring on lap 31. Got to battle a bit with Fernando Alonso at the beginning of the race and pretty early on got past Bottas. To be honest, what else can Lance Stroll do? That car is literally a total device, and at least he managed to challenge Fernando on the race before DNFing, so he gets a 5.5. Alex Albon seemed to have some kind of problem through the whole weekend that made him lose pace in comparison to Carlos Sainz. He was pretty mad about it when he was out in Q1, a 10th behind Sainz, and the team used his race as a practice session, making like 6 different pit stops. Hadn't seen something like this in a while. So, since he had a problem in qualifying and instead of racing he did free practice 4, I'm going to give him a 5. This time around, Valtteri Bottas was slower than his teammate and everyone else, to be frank, since without taking Albon into account, who wasn't really racing, Bottas was basically last. He's in a Cadillac, but still, he could have finished a couple of positions higher, since the American team kinda picked up the pace this weekend, in comparison to the first 2 rounds. I'm going to give him a 6. In general, I'll be benevolent with the backmarkers who have no real chance of fighting with the midfield teams. Good news, everyone! It seems like Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso are, at least, capable of finishing races now. Stroll put up a bit of a fight against Fernando at the beginning of the race, which makes him lose a few points in my book. And Fernando could have perhaps finished higher than Perez. But we did see Fernando once again taking his hands off the wheel on the straights to rest. So I'm not entirely convinced challenging the faster Cadillac was actually possible. He gets another 6. And a Cadillac managed to finish higher than another team by its own merit. Sergio Perez was faster than his teammate, and if only the backmarkers were allowed in the Grand Prix, he would have been the winner amongst them. Because the gap to the midfield is huge, can even be considered Formula 1.5, which is usually everyone but the front-running teams. So I'm going to give him a 7. Hopefully, by the end of the year, they can be a bit closer to the Williams and the rest of the midfield. Seems like they're on track to do so. The Argentinian Franco Colapinto qualified 15. If you've seen my summary of the Grand Prix, where I choose a team of the week at the end, then you know his teammate Pierre Gasly was my driver of the weekend. So ending up 1 position lower than when he started is just not good enough. Was involved in that incident with Bearman, but didn't lose much more than a few seconds. And you just can't finish this low when your teammate is being best of the rest. He gets a 3. The smooth operator Carlos Sainz qualified 16 and ended up the race in 15. There's not much to say about his race. The pace of the Williams this weekend was just abysmal. Not even the safety car coming out in a beneficial time for them could help him get some positions. A 6 for him. After a great result in his debut Grand Prix, Arvin Liebland hasn't been able to replicate a result similar to it. His race wasn't really anything to write home about. He started P10, ended up P14. Although it is true that he was one of the drivers who got kinda screwed by the safety car, so I'll be nice and give him at least a 5, but especially in comparison to his teammate, this race was not good. Gabriel Bortoleto did great in qualifying, managing to get into Q3 and starting the race on P9. In the race, however, he lost all those positions right at the start, then had luck with the safety car, but in that second stint, he just had no pace whatsoever, got overtaken by his teammate Hadja and Ocon, so his underwhelming race is gonna cost him a lot of points in the final score. I can only give him a 6. Isaac Hadja started one position higher than Bortoleto, P8, even higher than Max Verstappen, but in the first stint fell behind Lindblad and couldn't get past him. Overcut him in the pits by going a lap longer than the RB driver, but that meant the safety car came out after he had made his stop. His pace wasn't really that strong on the second stint, and even Hülkenberg managed to overtake him. Lawson's RB ended up much higher than him, and he struggled way too much with Lindblad at the beginning. In my opinion, if you're driving for Red Bull, you cannot finish behind any of the RB drivers. He gets a 4. I've mentioned the Hulk a few times, and this is where he ended up. P11 after starting on P13. Got lucky with the safety car, and his pace on the second stint was much better than his teammates, but still wasn't quite enough to get him into the points. So taking everything into account, I'm going to give him a 6.5, 0.5 higher than his teammate. Esteban Ocon was my clown of the week on China, but comes back strong in Japan. I'm not entirely sure how much merit should we give to him, or if we are just seeing his Grand Prix with a different view thanks to the disaster class his teammate offered us. Still, it was undoubtedly a solid performance by the Frenchman. Highest position midfield driver to not pit while under the safety car. We are getting to the point where you can all take a shot every time I say the words safety car, but it was so important and so detrimental to how the race went and explaining each driver's positions, I just have to mention it every time. Coming back to Ocon, he gets a 7. Liam Lawson did not have a good qualifying, just P14 while his teammate got into Q3, but he made up for it during the race, especially thanks to his teammate with the, say it with me, safety car. It wasn't as impactful on the two remaining midfield drivers, so I won't mention it on them, I promise. Lawson made a couple positions at the start, then made 3 more on the safety car, and was consistent enough to retain them. He gets a 7. Max Verstappen could only get a P8 at Japan, and at this point in time I'm basically considering the Red Bulls to be at midfield team. Top of the midfield, but midfield nonetheless, because if Verstappen himself can get close enough to the top 3 teams in 2 consecutive Grand Prix, in my opinion that means there's some circuits where this car just doesn't belong in that fight. Unlike his teammate, Verstappen didn't even make it into Q3. I think the last time that happened was in Singapore 2023. By lap 6, he had already made enough positions to be behind Pierre Gasly, where he will stay the rest of the race. He gets a 6.5. Pierre Gasly is my driver of the day, best of the race both in qualifying and in the race. Keeping a 4-time world champion behind for more than 40 laps is not an easy feat, but that's exactly what the Frenchman managed to do on Japan. He gets the maximum score possible, a 10. Before qualifying started, Lewis Hamilton had already warned he was finding the car as difficult to drive around Suzuka as last year. And that's exactly the version of Hamilton we saw at Japan. Last year's version. His worst version, probably. Comfortably beaten in qualifying by his teammate with a lap Charles wasn't even satisfied with. And in the race, despite being one of the 2 frontrunners to catch the safety car window to make his pit stop, he just lost position after position on that second stint. No pace at all compared to his teammate, and he gets a 5. Lando Norris was clearly slower than his teammate during the entirety of the Grand Prix. Pretty uneventful weekend for him. I'm pretty sure him and all of his fans will forget about it pretty soon, because it wasn't especially bad either, he just wasn't fast enough to be relevant. But he did do his part for the McLaren team, managing to end up ahead of Lewis Hamilton, overtaking him in the last few laps. A 6.5 for him in a solid McLaren weekend considering where we come from. George Russell might be starting to worry about the possibility of Antonelli putting up an actual challenge for the world title. He was out-qualified by the Italian once again and dropped to P4 after the start, despite gaining a position to his teammate. Made up positions until he found himself in second, right behind Oscar Piastri, but couldn't get past him before the stops. The Australian went in on lap 18 and Mercedes decided to go long, attempting an overcut. Russell didn't have much pace, especially when we compare it to his teammates, who was also going long and managed to get in 2-3 seconds of distance from him. Not as if it mattered that much, because he stopped right before the safety car came out, losing a potential victory, and his second stint wasn't good like at all, ending up behind Charles Leclerc and out of the podium. He gets a 7 thanks to his decentish start of the race. Another strong performance by the Monegasque, despite being unlucky with the timing of the safety car, was able to overtake George Russell and then his own teammate Lewis Hamilton. And what's perhaps even more impressive, got to keep Russell's Mercedes behind, just like he did in the first stint with Antonelli. Keeping both Mercedes behind at different times in the Grand Prix adds a lot of merit to his race. Unfortunately, qualified right behind Oscar Piastri and couldn't overtake him at the start. So I'm not going to say his race was perfect or that he couldn't have done it any better, because in my opinion, he could have at least ended one position higher. So he only gets a 9. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, was superb, qualifying on P3 and somehow got the lead after turn 1. I say somehow because we were used to seeing a Ferrari finishing the first lap on top. Without the safety car, it would have been close between him and the Mercedes to see who would have gotten the win. In my opinion, he couldn't have done it any better, given the circumstances. So in the first finish race for the Australian, he gets a 10. And our winner, Kimi Antonelli, had a dreadful start, which made him drop from pole to P6. Again, I don't want to put too much emphasis on the starts because I don't know up to which degree the drivers are responsible for them. But this much is true, Russell's start wasn't as bad. However, from that point forwards, Antonelli was clearly the fastest man on track, overtook Hamilton and Norris without much trouble, then was stopped by Leclerc. When Charles stopped and the Italian got clean air, he could show his real pace. It was pretty evident the overcool strategy was going to work, at least against the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. He even got himself at 2 or 3 seconds of Russell, who was running second most of the race. With that lucky safety car, he got first and then just wasn't seen again. A bit inconsistent, but damn fast will be the way to describe his race, and I'm going to give him a 9. And now it's your turn. How would you rate the drivers' performances in this Japanese Grand Prix? In which ratings do you agree or disagree with me? You can let me know in the comments down below, and since you're already down there, you can also subscribe to my channel. And that will be all for today. Thank you for watching the video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and you can also follow me on my social media. Until next time.